Welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 32.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas. So today's going to be a little bit different episode because I'm going to forgo the recommendations at the beginning because we have a nice long interview with not one but two awesome guests. There is one piece of business I'd like to take care of beforehand, and that is after 31 episodes posted, this is our 32nd, we have reached over 1,000 downloads, and that number is just flabbergasting to me. I know there's a ton of hugely successful podcasts out there, and even smaller podcasts that just like blow those numbers out of the water with their episodes. But for me, this is it's amazing. At least 1,000 times people are like, yeah, I'll download this. You know, it doesn't say how many times people listened to it or played it, so I don't know for sure there. I don't have the analytics for that, but just the simple fact that there's 1,000 downloads is just astounding enough to me. That comes out to about 32-ish downloads per episode, and that's, 31 more than I expected for any of them. So yeah, I just thank you. If you're listening to this and you've downloaded this episode or any of the previous episodes, thank you. I really appreciate it. And, I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope you continue to enjoy them. Now, time to get to my guests. As I said before, this episode was a long time coming. I've known Jon Westhoff and Bobgar Ornelas for probably a decade now. And, we met way back when, we get into our history. We get into a lot of stuff into this episode. I feel kind of redundant listing everything we get into again because it's a nice hefty episode. We get into a lot of stuff. We talk about a lot of fun stuff, and it's just really great sitting down with these guys and getting a chat, especially since I normally didn't get to see them in person as I usually do during convention seasons last year. So yeah, it's a great time, and they have a really great Kickstarter that we talk about that's still going on. It's pretty much well on its way to being funded, so you definitely want to jump in and help them push that over that number. And they still got a good deal of time left on the Kickstarter, but you definitely don't want to wait. So we'll get into that and a whole bunch of other stuff. So without further ado, Jon Westhoff, Bobgar Ornelas. Okay guys, so before we get to the big question of the podcast, I just kind of wanted to point out that I don't know if you guys remember, but Jon, your podcast was like the first one I was ever on, and I just remember being like drenched in like flop sweat because
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was like the first time I just had to like speak in and I was being recorded, and it was just crazy, but I had a great time. And so I just want to kind of bring that up because now we've kind of come full circle.
I would like to bring up that it was Bob's show, so if you're trying to trap us in some legal trappings here,
it was you guys and our dear friend Dan Pua, as well. I believe it was the why am I spacing on the name now? I'm on the spot, so I'm going to space on the name. Yes, BoobTube. So yeah, I just wanted to point out the full circleness of this whole event. So. But Jon, Bob, I've known you guys for quite a few years now. You're probably the oldest internet friends among the oldest internet friends I have, from way back in the old 11 o'clock comics forum days.
Mm-hmm.
When the internet was good, good and pure.
Well, it was always bad. We just didn't have
we were just
access to it.
We're locked away. We're locked away in our own little happy corner. But so Jon Westhoff, Bobgar I just fucked it up.
Bobgar
Ornelas.
That's the one.
Comics Coffee Metal. What are you guys digging right now?
Jon, go first.
Well, we can get coffee out of the way. I know that you think very lowly of me already, but you got to add something else to the list because I do not drink any coffee. But I'm grateful that you've had people on like Mario lately that don't as well. Some tea drinkers you've had mixed in here. I really only caffeine. I'm not supposed to have caffeine, So
Okay.
I really only go with caffeinated Mio that you add to water. And actually, I'm trying not to drink my calories in general. Approaching that big 4-0, so trying to be healthy. So when I reach for something, about once a week, I drink a sody, but it's mostly caffeinated Mio and water for me.
I was down with the meal for a long time too myself, so no judgment there. And John, I couldn't think any lower of you, so don't worry about it.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah. I looked for Mio for about a month after I discovered that it made John crazy, so I had to have it. I did slow down on the soda a lot, and I do drink homemade cold brew with nothing fancy as far as the coffee, so it's not name brand, or I mean, it has a name brand, but I'm not even going to mention it. It was easier when, before, especially in California, the lockdowns are pretty tight, so we can't get the whole bean and pour it yourself into little bags at at the good grocery stores around here. So just get the pre-bag stuff, grind it myself, and make the cold brew. But if it's just canned or anything, or bottled, the Chameleon straight black cold brew is pretty good. Keeps me pretty wired. I'm not a connoisseur of coffee. It's just trying to reduce my soda intake, because it was pretty disgusting for a while there. And I think it's been about 2 years since I've cut down to one a day or less. And that would be preferably a Dr. Pepper 10, but pandemic means I can't find it anywhere, so it's a Diet Dr. Pepper can.
Yeah, I've been hitting the soda pretty hard myself lately. Soda was my first vice.
Oh yeah.
Long before I loved coffee, like I would be the guy cracking open a Diet Pepsi at like 7:00 in the morning. So yeah, I have an ebb and flow. It's like if I cut back on my coffee, I'll be fine just drinking water or tea in the evening, and then slowly I'll start drinking more and more soda, and then I have to start the whole cycle all over again. So
yeah, the working from home, I only work from home once a week now, but when I was working from home 3-4 days a week, suddenly soda became more plentiful. So once I go back full time, I'm sure I could cut the soda out again, still a bit more active. It's when you're at home, it's easy to get drowsy and easy to fall back on bad habits like drinking.
If I've learned anything these past couple years, being mostly stay-at-home dad, is like bad eating habits are just so easy to fall right into, because instead of like eating the salad you brought for lunch, it's like, oh no, I can go make myself some quesadillas or a big old egg and cheese sandwich on giant pieces of rye bread. And
yeah, it's
so
carbs. I mean, I'm not thin or anything like that. I'm not a health nut, but John will attest, I eat salads 4 or 5 times a week for lunch. So but when you're at home, quesadillas, and it's easy to just like, oh, I haven't had potato chips in a while.
Yeah,
grab a bag of those. You eat them.
Having a potato chip in 8 minutes, that's me. It's the nonstop snacking is I got sick, lost like 10 pounds, and now I put it all back on. So
really, how'd you get sick?
I don't know if you've been watching the news, but
was it the flu, John?
I was hoping it was, but it was a little worse than that. But thankful I've recovered, and but now I've put all the weight back on because like you guys said, the downside of being home all the time.
Well, I did the same thing. I put on when lockdowns first hit, I put on like 10, 15 pounds, and over summer I lost it, and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling great. And then my daughter started up. I could literally see, because I track my weight, literally see like when she started school every week, starting to go up and up and up, just because, her day getting more structured through a monkey wrench into mine. So getting good habits in and workouts and stuff, and really did not happen.
Yeah, maybe you should change the name to comics exercise in metal or something like that. Maybe it'll inspire us all to get off our ass.
Granted, I'm sure there's older people, but I'm also I'm 44. I'm 45 this year, so starting to feel everything. I mean, you think at like 35, you're like, oh, I'm not bouncing back as I used to. And like, yeah, you got to start getting in your 40s. You're like, ooh, I need to get some exercise, or you get lazy pretty fast.
I'm 38, and I'm feeling it harder every year. After 35, it was like every year it just ramped up hard. It's harder and harder to get back to it. It's harder and harder.
I thought we were the same age. That's some bullshit.
Yeah, but you're not a drinker, correct? As far as alcohol goes. Yeah. See,
no, my main vice is food. So
me too.
Like well, I get up at 4 a.m. So that kind of, when you're older too, like get up at 4 a.m. So you have a couple beers or a couple of scotch or some rum, and
at 4 a.m.
2 or 3 of those. No, I mean before bed, and nightcap and all that, and you get up at 4 and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and you're like, you kidding me? Like, I used to be a champ. Like, I used to be able to drink.
Well, my wife and I often reminisce about how we used to just like get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and just like go to the gym. And then, you get older, you have kids, you experience a different level of tired.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be one of those. I'm not trying to be one of those guys like, you don't know how it's like to have kids. I'm just saying I've been exhausted in all forms, and just, dad exhausted is just a different level of just, you don't recover from it ever. I've come to terms with like, this is my life until I die.
Well, when you're active with your kids and not, you're involved with them. And you also have an awkward schedule too. I mean, I've seen you definitely, you pull the later nights too. You gotta get to my age. With kids my age now, I go to bed like this is late. Like when you told me 9:30, I was like, oh, I could feel it in my bones already.
Yeah, my wife says I don't burn the can at both ends. I just toss it into the fire. So yeah, it's a constant work in progress against everything. But it's the mental exhaustion is really what kills you. Is this because you're just so focused on them and everybody and their needs, and worrying about them or taking care of them, that it's just by the time the day is over and you're like, okay, you're just done. Your brain's just done. But you're like, I have all this stuff I gotta do still.
Yeah, no, and that again, like you said, not to complain or say people, whatever. It is hard to explain to people, here, and not just you, but in general. Yeah, people. I think it's hard to explain that to them. Like, yeah, they're like, no, you just sit down at 9 after they go to bed, and it's like you're drained from being involved and being energetic and teaching and enjoying your kids too. It's a good thing. Yeah. It's a positive exhaustion, but you still like the act of sitting down and being creative. It is a little hard. Hence why, you asked me to come on the show, I think 2 years ago, and why I finally now, had asked you, because there was some gaps in there. I got a little burnt out.
Yeah. And part of doing this show is this kind of, one, it's talking to people I know and I like, because as much as I joke about it, Jon, I really like you, I consider you a friend, and I enjoy having these conversations with people, and I don't really do the bar con stuff. I really don't have the opportunities to like go out and I'm kind of a homebody, so doing the podcast lets me talk to all these people that I know from online and have had these smaller conversations and meeting them in person at cons, but I never got to sit down and have like an in-depth conversation. So having the podcast kind of gives me that little bit of consistent creative output, because with this crazy schedules that we all do have, the comics output isn't as strong. I don't sit down and have 8 hours to draw a page every day. I have 2.5 to 4 hours on a really good day to sit down and do something. So sacrificing 2.5 hours every 2 weeks to record and edit a podcast. Yeah, that I consider that worth it, and keeps my sanity going a little bit. So.
And it's also diversifying. You're doing something, not only you're connecting with people and like you said, BarCon, try to have a conversation without being interrupted, or hey, I got to get up and go to the restroom, right? I got to go grab another beer. You want one? Oh, you want water? This and that. And then they leave for 30 minutes because the line's so long, and you come back and you're like, so what happened? What I miss? And then it's like a completely new set of in jokes and callbacks and references and stuff like that. But going back to what I meant by creatively, so you're doing something audio. Obviously, you're a musician, so this isn't too far away from your wheelhouse there, as well. And then
No.
you the thing. I mean. I always feared when I was younger, and maybe I didn't know how to put it to words, but where even now I don't even know how to put it to words. But you see some old people, they thrive in their old age, and they're quick-witted, and others, they kind of what's the term? Like the mind stagnates, and they lose a little bit of that cognition, and you hear studies, doing something as simple as a crossword puzzle, this or that, because their mind isn't engaged as much. And you know what? Even if you're just doing one creative outlet, it's not going to work. So you have to, if you're capable of creating music, you create music. I am not. So I used to sing in a band, but that's a different story. But I'm not a musician. I can't play the guitar, or, the bass, or drums. But I'm starting to learn woodworking, and
yeah, that's true. You talk about that a lot.
I'm not great at it, and I know, I see all the imperfections, but I'm learning every time. It's like a step closer to being better. And even if you never become like this miraculous woodworker or Grammy award-winning artist, or even your Eisner award-winning artist, you're still creating something that wasn't there, and you're keeping your mind engaged. And that, back to like my fear, was that you fear that you won't be cognizant of what's going around, in your old age and elderly age, not now, and so you don't want to. I'm assuming I'm preaching to the choir. You as a person, I feel that we all want to improve not only what we do, our hobbies or our skills, but improve as a person. And these little things, you think, well, there's nothing to them, but you stick to the podcasting schedule, or the schedule, or just the routine and the discipline of editing, and the discipline that you learn, and and that will move you forward, maybe in your day job or with people. I know I'm rambling here, and I swear to God, I'm sober.
I was gonna say, he asked you if you like coffee. Not you can for a philosophy lesson, but
well, granted, we did get off track, but I'm enjoying what Bob's saying, and I completely agree, and I understand. It's just it's
find
kind of
different
like
ways to stay engaged creatively. Like I started a YouTube show where that gives me, at least if I'm trying to be creative but I'm exhausted, I can just edit the show or record, me playing Magic the Gathering drafts and stuff. I get what you're saying, Bob.
Yeah, and it's just like, the goal is to, some people say like, oh, the goal of life is to lead, or whatever. They just like, it's just a example. I don't even know where it originates from, but you go somewhere and you leave it better than when you entered it. Like whether it's a park, you pick up a piece of trash, and same thing, maybe you're not going to be a world-renowned figure, but maybe in someone's life you helped them. You just said like, hey, I'll give this guy a little push. Hey, that artwork's pretty good, or and stuff like that. And all the little things that you don't think are helping you, like I said, the discipline of playing music, or even just editing a podcast, or self-publishing your own book, which I think we've all done. All these things add up, and
it's
a lot of these things are very solitary
yeah.
endeavors, so it's very important to connect to people.
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge part of it. It is a very solitary thing. So getting to just have those interactions via even social media or via doing the podcast or what have you. Especially now that cons are a big question mark for the past year and next year. Who knows? I'm hoping C2E2 in December. Like, I hope things are well enough to where that can be at least some sort of event that I can look forward to. Yeah, early December.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, early December in Chicago. Not the best time, but it's so much better than late February in Chicago.
Honestly, yeah.
Last year.
It's actually
early December.
It's early December. With some of the other big cons, it actually might be a good thing.
Yeah, early December, winter's still kind of a novelty. Like, you can still get like some probably close to 60-degree days in early December. There's a different vibe in the air. Like, Christmas hasn't happened yet, so everyone's still kind of like, all right, Christmas is coming. Like, yay. There's a different, just because that's the major holiday that is associated with December, the majority with like downtown and decorations and things like that. So yeah, it's not my first choice. I would prefer like a late spring or something, but that's fine. But hopefully the world's settled down enough and all that. So speaking of cons and comic conventions, what comics have you guys been enjoying lately?
Nothing on the
short
stump
answer.
Nah,
nothing on nothing on Bobgar's reading stump. I missed those posts.
Yeah, I know. I the stump went away, and then when I moved, so I just have the little like, it's not a cutting board, but it looks like a cutting board. It's just a little sliver, and it's just during the summers, maybe not this past summer, I do so much overtime, and it's just like, it's so hard to just do little things like that when you're working so much. And the commute, live in California, Southern California, so the commute's always bad. And unlike you guys, I don't have kids, so imagine if I did, I would not be drawing or anything of the other of the sort, because it's like, well, what's more important, right?
Well, you can do things concurrently sometimes when they get, when they're real little and they're just, sleeping, eating, and pooping.
Well, like Jon said, he took a couple years off, even though they're a little older. They were already a little older at the time, but things catch up, and you, like, I wouldn't ever.
Now he watches me color and letter inappropriate things. Bob draws and oops.
you got to teach him how to flat.
I know, he's super into it. My niece too. I'm gonna get him on it.
Yeah,
get him on.
I'm waiting for when my daughter's old enough. Like, honey, you're gonna start inking backgrounds.
Come on now, you gotta earn your keep.
And who writes this inappropriate stuff that I have to draw?
You do.
Shut up.
I only channel from you. What you want to?
So Jon, what?
Draw.
To answer the question legitimately, oh man, 9 years now at least. Always 2000 AD. Always loved anthology comics. Marvel Comics Presents in the early 90s, 89, 90. Dark Horse Presents, the first run, was always one of my favorite books. And always had an interest in Judge Dredd and Slain and other books like that from the 2000 AD. I forget who was publishing them back then. Right now it's Rebellion. So once I became aware of the app and started getting the stuff digitally, because it's a lot easier that way. The magazine, Judge Dredd magazine, 2000 AD. I just read, or I'm reading, I'll look it up in a minute, but yeah, I am reading or rereading a lot of Kaz's Underworld. There's a collection. I'm reading that on Hoopla right now.
Nice.
It's just one of my. It's just always been one of my favorite strips, and it doesn't always hit, but it's always good to look at.
Nice.
Sounds good. I as soon as you mentioned it, I remembered how much you like 2000 AD and the anthology stuff, and you guys kind of spearheading a lot of anthology stuff and all that. That makes a ton of sense, given your affinity for it and all that. Jon, do you have the same affinity for that, or are you digging something else?
I do like anthologies, but unfortunately, Bob does bring up often trying to get me on the 2000 AD bandwagon, and I prefer, when he recommends a story like Brass Sun or something that when they collect it or put it in longer versions. But yeah, I probably should be on that because I am very much into anthologies, and really, that's the only one that's like surviving and thriving these days. But I've actually been going back to the well, and I got the Swamp Thing Absolutes from DC Black Label,
Okay.
the Alan Moore, Bissett, Rick Veitch run, and I've been reading that and loving it again. Second time through it for me. Last time I read it in digital, so I'm excited to see it in paper in this huge format. That's been really great. And something newer, recommended by, I think, most of our mutual friends, Miss Sarah Harris from, you mentioned at the start, the EOC forums, and met, through that crew. She just happened to mention on Twitter a comic called Spy Island. Have you heard of it from Image?
Spy Island? No, I don't think I have.
A Bermuda Triangle mystery. Yeah, she just, I forgot how she even said it, but she was like, she should be the agent for the book, but she described it perfectly. And I just happened to be headed to Amazing Fantasy out in Frankfort, Illinois, to pick up some Magic cards. And I was like, well, I'm going to get some comics. I haven't gotten any comics off the shelf in forever. It's by Kane Mitternick, and McCall is the artist. And it is a weird Bermuda Triangle spy mystery. A little bit pushing it, a little bit, like Wes Anderson-y characters where they're, a little bit overdone or over dramatic. But it was really good. I was surprised. It's only 4 issues. I hope that there'll be more. And I would encourage people to pick it up because the 4th one had like just come out, and she mentioned it. Oh, it's wrapping up. It's so great. And I hadn't even heard of it. And that there's a lot of books like that on the shelves, and they just happen to have all 4 issues, and I was glad to scoop it up.
Awesome. Yeah, it's kind of astounding, like how many like metal bands and stuff like that. I try to stay at least cognizant of all these different titles and all these different books coming out, at least being aware of them. And still, there's something cool sounding that I'm like, oh, I've never heard of this before. What is this? So,
and the comics, music, comics, all this stuff. There's just so much, which is a great thing about comics right now. I always say it's the golden age of comics. If you're reading and not enjoying what you're reading, you're not trying, because there's literally dozens and dozens of amazing books of every kind of genre you could imagine coming out month after month.
Yeah, it's one of the selfish things I get out of doing this is just getting cool stuff recommended to me that I was just unaware of. So I'm definitely gonna look into that and check that out. So we've answered the first 2, boys. Now let's bring it home. Metal. Jon, I know you like metal. Bobgar, I'm not entirely sure. I am.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, you're talking to one of those guys like, well, like, in not like, oh, I'm trying to be cool, I like everything, but you get older, you go through phases. I started off not liking music at all, and tell a little story here. So didn't really listen to any music, never put on the radio myself. We're talking the early 80s here. I was a kid, and one of my cousins birthday, and it wasn't like Chuck E. Cheese, but it was a restaurant, and we're going like 40 minutes away, and my brother was driving, and no big deal, right? Get back in the car, we're gonna head home, and I think I'm like 12. It was about 1989. I'm like, I opened up the glove box for whatever reason, and I was like, "There's a cassette in there." I'm like, "Hot damn, this
Cassette.
is pretty kick-ass artwork." I probably didn't say those words, but I was like, "Oh, this is bad or awesome or whatever." The terminology was in, and it was Motorhead's rock and roll album.
Oh,
I knew it
nice.
was going to be you found. I thought it was going to be like you bumped into Lemmy at a gas station or something, but it's basically the same.
Hey kid, take this.
He always liked classic rock, so I knew the songs even if I didn't know the bands, and I knew some Black Sabbath, I knew some Ozzy, obviously, and nothing ever like clicked with me, and I put it in, and I'm like, oh, let's hear it. To this day, I still think it's one of the best albums out there. Jon was asking about Motorhead, and I said, well, I think I gave you 5 albums, and that was one of the last ones. And not because it's like one of the important ones, It just happens to be like one of my favorite ones, and for the reasons I just told you.
Motorhead's kind of like the great equalizer for a lot of just like
especially
heavier hard rock music. From punk people to hard rock people to classic rock people to metalheads. They're like, what about Motorhead? And everyone's like, yeah, put on some Motorhead. Like everyone can agree on that,
Yeah, especially like those first couple albums. I mean, you had like a blues influence, I forget which one is it, On Parole? I forget the one, but you have guest stars like Wendy O. Williams and what are they called? I forget what their name is. But yeah, it's great stuff, and it has a lot of influences. And later on, it still rocks, but it's still a little can't rock as hard as you are when you're 30 or whatever, however old he was.
I never rocked that hard anyway. So as I'm getting older, I'm getting into heavier and heavier stuff, and I'm like, I'm gonna see where this goes. by the time I'm 50, I'll just be listening to nothing but like the darkest, most lo-fi, blackened metal.
Nice. We all get there eventually. No, it's funny you mentioned that you didn't know Bob's taste, but you think of me as a metal guy. I feel like Bob is more the metal guy in this equation. I mean, I definitely pretty big into it, but yeah, like you said, I've kind of went through a, I don't know, 5 or 10 year period here where I didn't listen to too much metal, especially not really searching out a lot of new stuff, but have definitely come back around to it the last couple of years. And, I've listened to a lot of like indie artists, St. Vincent, Angel Olsen. I love Alex Cameron. But now, like what I've been into recently, Every Time I Die put out a couple new songs. I don't know if that's a precursor to another album or they were just releasing it because of, downtime in the year, but I've been really into that lately. And then
Every Time I Die is that band's come up a lot, and it's a band that I keep trying to find my way into, and I just can't seem to fully latch onto, because there's definitely stuff they do that I can appreciate and I can enjoy, be it musically or, with the vocals or whatever. But yeah, it's just they come up a lot, and I'm like, there's something missing for me here that I can't quite latch on.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I went back and listened, and actually the quality of the recordings of their first 2 that I really liked, Hot Damn and Gutter Phenomenon, they were like rough on my old man ears, but I still enjoyed them. But I did realize that, like, I think you had to be in that era, which is a lot of music, right? Like Bob saying about Motorhead, like I can talk about that. Bob recently suggested some Motorhead, and I did enjoy it, but really the only one I've re-listened to in the last couple weeks is Ace of Spades, because that album I felt like had the most quote unquote hits or songs that I could really. But I've never, like you guys talk about people mentioning Motorhead, until I met Bob. I barely even knew of Motorhead. You know of them, but they weren't in my core group. So again, that's why I think of him as a metal guy. But yeah, Every Time I Die, I think you had to be around in that era to that was part of it. Like, I'm into them because of their style and everything, but they're kind of a little, obnoxious, a little, flamboyant, I guess, for a metalcore band. But
yeah, I kind of missed the whole metalcore thing, because when the whole metalcore thing was happening, I think that's when I was kind of like in a really weird flux with what everything I was listening to, and I really wasn't looking for a new metal. And then I didn't really start like diving really back into expanding my scope of metal bands until like the 2010 and on. So, and by then, I think metalcore had kind of
Yeah,
been around for
right.
a while.
You're
So,
talking metalcore as in like hardcore bands, like hardcore punk bands that, you know, with more of a metal and death metal edge. Is that what
it's a
you
hard
thought?
term, but more the bands, yeah, that like have, you know, the breakdowns,
Break.
but they might actually sing, you know, a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
Okay, well,
yeah,
no,
it's
just
it's
because
yeah, it's
you talk to different people and especially different eras. You say like a hardcore band, and you know, some people think happy hardcore, you know, techno, which somebody will get mad that I called it techno, but you know, industrial or EDM, which the terms were probably, well, EDM probably wasn't around at the time, but yeah, some people use these terms like, oh no, that's hardcore, but I was like, no, dude, that's corn. Like that's not what the term hardcore. I mean, you could say they're a hardcore band, but not a hardcore band, you know. And like people were saying like, oh no, if you want that, you know, this band, and I'm like, no, that's just a straight up metal band. Like it's so these terms, I mean, like depending on the crowd and like the terminology, it gets all confused. So I don't even know. Like when you said it was Every Time I Die, and I was like, isn't that didn't they start off like a hardcore band? Because basically, like Sworn Enemy was just a hardcore band, and all of a sudden they're
no, they weren't quite
metal.
as hardcore as that. That's why I say metalcore. You know, almost like new metal, but not quite. You know, Mudvayne style. But yeah, they were. Yeah, you'd have to listen to it. But yeah, I know it's like a weird term, and we all try to shove things
like
in
metal,
there,
metal, and like harder edge band, harder punk, you know, punk stuff, and like.
Well, because I was always in
a lot of the
bands,
genres. You're just like tripping over names, and everyone has a different determination of it. Because, you know, as I've mentioned on the show many times before, like you say, I listen to metal. Like that could be anything, really.
Yeah.
Like, is it like, you know, someone could say I listen to metal, and all they listen to is like, you know, Black Sabbath and like early Judas Priest. And then someone's like, I listen to metal,
like
and
that.
all they listen to is like, you know, Dragon Force and Jag Panzer and stuff like that.
which
you
is
know?
a great
So
thing
it's
about
like,
metal, which drives me nuts when people are like, I don't like metal. It's like metal is such a awesome. It's just energetic, loud, distorted music. You know,
I have metal for every mood, man. If I'm like pissed off and angry, I got metal for that. If I'm like feeling something, I want something dancier and kind of electronic, I got metal for that too. You know, it's, you know, and obviously metal's not the only thing I listen to, but it's like you got so much, there's so much openness into like, just let's throw this shit in there. Let's throw this influence in here. Let's throw this in here for all these metal bands. It's like, you know, right now I'm writing a death metal record, and I'm like, you know, I'm listening to death metal bands because I'm like, you know, trying to get that vibe going and all that. And my original idea of death metal, before I started getting into more of that from a couple of years ago, has vastly, it was so narrow, because now there's so many variations to death metal now. Just you know, alone there's like groove death metal and electronic death metal and doom death metal, and you know,
well, that's true too. But even like if you name like, okay, early 90s, you know, who were the heavy hitters? You had Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, and Obituary.
right?
Just
When you say death metal,
there was death, of course.
and that's what you think.
But we'll just take those three. Those are three very distinct takes on death metal, especially Obituary, which was like, you know, you really never had the satanic aspect, or you know, the stuff like that.
The guttural vocals, yeah.
And for like a band like Death, you would think like, oh man, these guys are the death metal band, and it's like, no, they're like, they share a lot of DNA with like Pantera, like, you know, and you know, a lot of the vocals aren't stuff like you would think.
Yeah, I haven't heard them in a long time, but I think, you know, Death, the band, not the proto-punk band, which is also a really good band, but I think that, was there like some Merciful Fate in there as well? Some, maybe not as, you know, light, obviously, but wasn't there a little bit more? I haven't heard it in years. I mean,
well, I mean, he was like, Chuck was an amazing lead guitarist, so that I could definitely see, because he was, you know,
he definitely got
some shit on guitar, so you could definitely
he had a
see
side
stuff
project.
Like
yeah, he had a side project called Control Denied, which was much more progressive.
Oh, really?
And like that, yeah. And so yeah, it's just, you know, my scope or my idea of what this is so vastly. It was, even like you said, you can mention those bands, Obituary, Decide, Death, like all these bands that kind of like started what death metal is. If you actually do go back and listen to them, it's like, oh, I had an idea that these bands all kind of like had the same sound, but they don't. They're all coming at it from a different approach. And
even just because Bonded by Blood by Exodus, if you hear that, I mean, granted that was thrash, or at least that's what they were calling it.
There you go with those names, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, given that progression with that first singer, would that become, because some of the death metal bands, like you listen to the earlier stuff or like the demos, and you're like, oh, it's a pretty good thrash band or whatever,
Yeah.
But it just progresses it, and became what we know as death metal, or at least recognizable as death metal, and then they get a new singer, and it's just like, what the F is this? And I love Exodus, like, by the way. So like even the change was like so jarring.
I never got this into Exodus.
Well, just listen to Bonded by Blood and what was
the one with Piranha on it? Toxic Waltz. I know that one, right?
Yeah, that one. I forget the name of the album.
Yeah.
The Last Act of Defiance, is that what it's called?
I don't remember. I don't remember it well enough, but
yeah, Exodus is a bit of a blind spot for me.
So that's your next blind spot.
I have a few bands lined up that I'm like, man, I need to do some deep dives.
Speaking of which, the only reason I wanted to come on the show is because of your deep dive. The only thing I've really been listening to almost every day is Dio Sabbath, thanks to you and your guests. Because that was a huge blind spot for me. So that's really the only reason I wanted to come on the show, is to rebuke and tell Dave Jordan he's wrong. But
what did Dave Jordan say? It was called Fabulous Disaster, John.
Got it.
Okay. No, I had an episode of the show where I went back and I listened to all the old Dio Sabbath records because I'd never listened to them in full before. And I kind of just like gave my thoughts on it because, my Black Sabbath is Ozzy and Sabbath. So
which mine was.
So I was just kind of like going through it. And I had a few, previous guests and friends come on and send like, what their, thoughts on what their favorite album from that era was. So Dave, really loved Heaven and Hell. And I was less of a fan of it. Not that I thought it was bad at all, but, in terms of Black Sabbath, to me, it's like, I don't know. So, but, in the end, I actually ended up having an album I really do like. And, I do like a bunch of stuff off of all those albums. And I think John was just wanting to like a different album, essentially, and shove it in Dave's face.
Right. Because I do think, I joke, but I do think Dave was right. And, I mentioned earlier about like every time I die, you had to be part of the era. When you're not, this gave me a reason. Like this was part of a lot of music to most of us it's obviously subjective, but there's the relationship aspect. There's, interacting with your friends and you guys getting excited about it. And it was cool to hear 3 different opinions, not to rehash. This isn't the recap of Don's old show, but it was cool that they had 3 different opinions. But I do think that Dave was right, as much as I hate to say it publicly. That's the only one I've gone back to that one many times. The other ones are good, but honestly only listened to them once through, maybe twice. There were some good songs, but I can't move past Heaven and Hell. It's just a good album. But I do feel like it's a Dio album, obviously.
Yeah, and on its own, like as an entity, just like take away Black Sabbath from the equation, it's a really good album. I fully agree. Just I can't remove that hat of it being a Black Sabbath album, so I have to measure it against my favorite Black Sabbath albums.
Because I have listened to it so late. I'm sure I'd heard some of it, but not really. I don't even think of it when I put it on. I'm like, oh, listen to some Dio. And I'm telling you, I'm not kidding.
It's easily better.
I listened to it like twice today because I just feel
like it's
so
better.
Good.
Yeah, it's easily better than like the last few Ozzy Sabbath albums for sure.
Yeah, come on,
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's be
listened
honest,
to all. I listened to all from the first. I listened to first through Dio, and I almost couldn't get those. They were just, there was nothing there. There was maybe one good song and 2.5 albums or something. That was real. But yeah, I do really enjoy the Heaven and Hell.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in real quick. So one real quick story. I only have one brother. He was a metalhead, rock and roll and metal. So of course, obviously, that's how I got introduced to it. And we're talking about Dio because he's always been a fan of Dio. And what is it? It was Richard Blackmore's Rainbow, correct? Where he was first, and then you know, I know later he did his solo stuff, but there was the Sabbath stuff, and I one day I was over. I think it was maybe even this year, and it came up, and I was like, "Oh no, it was last year." But it came up, and I was over his house, and it was like, I was like, "No, I've never listened to any Dio Sabbath." He's all, he's giving me the look like, "You have."
I didn't realize that.
And he tells me, "You have,"
with
and
you, yeah, with him, yeah.
I said, "No, I haven't, or not that I'm aware of." And he's all like, "Of course." And he starts naming off songs, and I'm like, you know, and I'm like, and he's like mad at me, and I'm like, so I went home and, you know, I listened to some solo Dio, but I still, like, I don't know. It's like, it's just like one of those things. And in my defense, I will say this, you know, I'm 44. I was talking about cassette tapes and, you know, maybe not records, but, you know, early CDs where you had a choice between CDs and a cassette, and cassette was always like a couple bucks cheaper. So do you really like the band? Get it on CD. You're testing something out, you get it on cassette.
Right.
So back then, I was like, well, I'm going to get all the Ozzy stuff because I like Ozzy, Sabbath, right? And I like Ozzy, well, at least the Randy Rhoads stuff. And I know people disagree with me on that as well. But, you know, back then, and, you know, it cost money, and like a serious chunk of money when you know, you don't come from a well-off family. You know, you don't get an allowance and stuff like, you know, you're washing cars or you know, cutting an old lady's lawn, you know, for a couple bucks a month. So these things, you know, were very special. Music was very special. So you had to choose wisely, and if, you know, you didn't have that Dio gene in you, and you knew you liked Ozzy, well, you're going to get all the Ozzy stuff first, of course, you know. And then by the time you did get that money, you know, you're already on to a different style of music. And, you know, it's cliche that, you know, kids in high school, you know, they go through phases and everything like that. But seeing that I was never into music till I was like, you know, late 12 or 13, you know, I expanded my world so much. I started working when I was 15. I had just turned 15, I think, the month before. And I was making $5.15 an hour. And I think the minimum wage was like $3.15 or $3.25. So I was balling, you know.
You're making bank.
And, you know, I just bought every comic book because I discovered comic books and music at the exact same time. 13 years old, 1989.
It's a good time.
So
didn't get any better than that.
And then,
Black and white Ninja Turtles off the shelf. Ronnie James Dio records.
Devouring everything I can, you know, money out the wall, you know, out the door, out the window. Ugh, I am drunk. Yeah. And you know, but it was always one of those things like, can you afford to try this new band? And you know, and even though it was the same band, you guys already said like, oh no, it was like, you know, technically it's Black Sabbath, but it's not Black Sabbath.
You know, it's so funny you should say that too, because, and I'm actually grateful that I didn't. If I had listened to Dio 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't have liked it, because I really don't, and I didn't at the time, and I still don't. I don't love like Iced Earth or Iron Maiden or Queensryche, which I would put closer to that category.
Iron Maiden.
I don't love Maiden. I'm sorry. I never got into.
Okay, you like Clutch, right?
I do. I love Clutch.
You know, what is it? Behold the Colossus. You know, that's their version of an Iron Maiden song, right? And that's like one of the best songs on that album.
Sure, and I'm not saying I don't dislike them. They're just not a band that I hold as in high esteem as others. But again, coming to this Dio stuff 20 years later, now that I have a connection to it, and I don't know, maybe I came to it at the right time. But I agree with you. I was joking with Dave. Part of the reason I didn't listen to a lot, like you said, was because I was buying every Deicide album. I bought like every Vader album at one point. Death metal. Probably listened to them once or less. Dissect in bands I enjoyed, but I spent my formative years that you're talking about spending my money. I was very much into death metal, and that was kind of Well, then I found bands like War, and because my introduction really to metal was Megadeth was really the one that got me in. So sometimes that affects your taste, but I really liked death metal. I liked Morbid Angel. I liked stuff like that, and I kind of shunned a lot of the other stuff. Like, if they sing really high, until I was later teens, and I was I'm an idiot.
I could see why you'd be like that. With you're coming at it from this way, because the falsetto type, the higher vocals. It's
when you're 14, you're like, this sucks, and then when you're 40,
unless it instantly connects with you, it's just kind of something that you kind of have to kind of grow into. Like, I didn't really get into like you, like 20 years ago. I can say 20 years ago I liked some Dio songs. I liked Holy Diver, I liked Rainbow in the Dark,
of course.
But listening, and I've heard those those Dio Sabbath stuff and all that around that time, not the full albums, but songs here and there. And I'm like, no, this is just not for me. But now my ear has grown accustomed to that. And then there's also like some thrash bands that, not so much Exodus, because I've tried Exodus. I just can't really get too much into the vocal style.
Which album? Because there was two, and
I've tried their latest couple, and then a couple of the early ones. I mean, Gary Holt is a riff monster. Like, that dude is just a machine of badass riff after badass riff. Like, it's one of those bands where it's like, man, I love the music so much, but the vocals just, I'm waiting, and it's not that I'm like, oh, I hate them, or I can't stand the vocals. It's just like, I need to find my in with these vocals. I want to find that batch of songs that I'm like, okay, I like these songs. I can get used to this, and then I can just go back.
Yeah, you just need that one in. It could just be one song, or like even if somebody covered a song. But speaking of vocals that maybe aren't to everybody's taste, Nuclear Assault. That's an acquired taste. I mean, I acquired it pretty fast. I first heard Survive, and I'm like, dig this. And while I don't, Nuclear Assault isn't a band I listen to often anymore, but the aforementioned bands, before we get off of Sabbath, Born Again, as long as Skip Digital Bitch, it's a freaking monster album.
Yeah, I only listened to it one time through, and it was not. I didn't get into it, but
whether it's Sabbath or not, it's a monster album.
The non-Dio, non-Sabbath albums, I think, non-Ozzy albums, I think on their own would have been better judged if they were just
absolutely
Tony's new band. There's a really great Tony Iommi, Glenn Hughes record. I think it's just called Hughes Iommi, or Iommi Hughes.
Really?
That came out in the 2000s. That's a really good record. Yeah. I remember back in the days of, less than legal means of acquiring music, somehow I had acquired like the demos or like the unreleased tracks of this, because I was probably looking for Black Sabbath or something. And it was like, no, I think I was looking for that Iommi record where he had a different singer on each track. But I found this, and I'm like, oh wow, this is like really good. It's the one. It's got songs, Dopamine, and I'm forgetting the other one. But yeah, that's a really good record. But yeah, because I mentioned Hughes, I think, was on Seventh Star, the Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath album or something like that. That's the weirdly named one because it wasn't supposed to be a Black Sabbath album, but they're like, It probably sell a few more thousand copies if we throw Black Sabbath
blame them,
on
right?
there.
They gotta make their money too.
And Tony's like, I guess whatever. It's the late '80s,
Yeah, I always appreciate hearing you guys talk because I'm not like a historian. Like I didn't even realize there was more than 2 singers in Black Sabbath until recently. So like I don't dig into the history as much. I find it as it comes to me. So I always appreciate. I'm kind of the same way with comics too. That's why I like listening to people who are more learned in the field. Talk about different things and this guy inked this guy and did you know? Like I don't. That's not what brings me to music and comics. So it's cool to hear the history from a lot of you guys, and that's what I enjoyed. Circling back to listen to you guys, and it got me jazzed to dig through. And then Bob did encourage me to listen to the after Dio, and then that is what it is. But like you said, if they had split it into 3 different bands, called it I don't know, Tony Iommi.
Yeah, I'll probably do a follow-up episode and just kind of like go over the non-Dio Ozzy Sabbath stuff and just kind of give that a fair shake, and see how that goes. So
yeah, I mean, guys, at least the music's going to be
at least the music's going to be
a certain level. But that said, we did kind of crap on the Ozzy's Return albums. So.
Well, the 13 was a fine album, but I think the Heaven and Hell album, The Devil You Know, which is the Black Sabbath and Everything But Name, that came out in 2009 with Dio, I think it's a better album than 13. Not that 13's a bad album, but like, or even that, I'm not trying to, poo-poo on the last few Ozzy albums with Black Sabbath in the 70s, but if you're going to rank them all, you got the first 3 with Ozzy. Those are unmovable. 1, 2, 3. They will not move from my top. And then from there, get a little fuzzy. Most likely for me, probably the Heaven and Hell album probably be number 4. And then
it's probably better than Volume 4.
Volume 4, huh?
It's okay. It's got a couple of good songs, but
Volume 4,
and Sabbath's Bloody Sabbath is the same. It's like 2 or 3 good songs and then it just falls off.
Yeah, like if Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was just like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, like on every track.
Yeah, right. That's a great song. That song
it'd be number 1.
That is true.
But it's not. It's a shining point, and that's kind of what I was mainly trying to get at with those albums.
Creativity.
You could tell they were just kind of
and Dio brought it back
done
again, but it just wasn't the same band. It was
different. It was different. It was a different.
What's so weird
outlet,
about it too is like you hear the sound of it, and it makes you feel like it's. But then they also were kind of the catalyst for that movement. Didn't Killers come out like right after Heaven and Hell? Like maybe they were kind of the ones that push it, and because I'm listening out of order, I kind of almost feel like they're ripping off other people of that era, but maybe they were actually driving people more towards that sound because they were so big. I don't know, but
that I don't know. That's a good question. We'll have to investigate that. But as much as I'm enjoying talking all this metal with you guys do have some really cool comic stuff coming up, and I don't want to, not get to talking about that. You guys started off, making comics together. You guys formed, King Bone Press. And, I worked with you guys on a few things. I really enjoyed it.
BANDTHOLOGY.
I've BANDTHOLOGY. You guys helped spearhead the 11 O'Clock Comics anthologies.
Low concept.
1,000 years ago.
I worked on World's Strongest Mailman. I think that was my first. Those were my first paid pages, I believe.
Wow.
So thank you for that.
I know
you started this episode with all kinds of horrible things that I've caused you, and now like you're making me feel bad.
Yeah. Like I said, I joke a lot, but I really do like Jon, and I respect him, and I'm glad I'm glad our paths crossed. I can just edit this out later.
Okay.
I'm just letting you know this now to put you in a false sense of security before I come back harder later.
You don't need to do
that's
that.
What she said.
Jon is the equivalent of.
Well, he's a drummer. He's used to just getting shit on, right? So
just go hard all the time on it, like Bob. He's just constantly telling me I'm an idiot. You dummy.
You misspelled beta fish. Idiot.
Beta tape.
But I have a lot of. I think you were actually Jon. I think you were my second commission ever. The Hercules.
Oh,
Nice. I still have
fighting
that.
Thor.
I'm looking at it right behind me.
Fighting Thor.
I'm looking at it right behind me.
So it's we've again I've known you as long as I've been like dipping my toes back into drawing and making comics and that community online and all that. So when you guys decided to cease King Bone, I think 2 years ago now, was it?
Yeah.
right.
it was understandable.
2.5.
But it was also
John
kind of a
wanted to
bummer.
raise his family and stuff, and
Yeah,
I wanted
kids
to,
raise themselves these days. Just throw some YouTube on or something, just it's fine.
I wanted to spend time with my new wife, my rabbits.
We'll get to your rabbits. Hold on a second.
You could have limped along with it here.
No, it was
what are you
all
trying to say? Was I the driving force here?
John killed it.
But you guys couldn't stay down for long. You guys came back, and now you have Part-Time Comics, which is a fantastic
boy, did we
name.
pick a great year to come back.
No.
Hey,
I must interject here.
So many of us, yeah.
John is Part-Time Comics. I'm just
work for hire.
Work for hire.
He's distancing himself already. It's sad.
No. Seriously,
it's
John
all Westhoff.
We incorporated. We did that for a year and a half or two, and just things fell off for me, John and Ford, and things just didn't fall into place. It wasn't the right time, so it was just time to rebrand or just restart. And I think because I was default King Bone Press, I think the last post was we're gone, we're shutting our doors, but that doesn't mean that we're stopping doing what we do. We're going to keep on going. We're just going to keep on collaborating with our friends, because that's all that this was about. And I've been doing my stuff, which never saw print, because you heard this whole thing about 2020 being a bad year. So every time I'm like, I'm going to do this, we're going to lock down for 15 days. We're going to stretch that out for another 3 months. We're going to have a little bit of riots, and we'll start at protests, and then there was riots. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
And the snowball kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here. So what better time than now? I mean, if we waited till the time was right, it's never going to be right. So we just
you got to just pull the Band-Aid off at some point.
Ain't that the truth?
And I think there's like 4. Is there 4 now? Vaccines out there, so people are going to start getting out there and making money and having the disposable money. And I think I know we haven't even talked about the Kickstarter, but it's going to be pretty affordable from what I could tell. John,
Kickstarter in comics actually had really great years.
I backed more this year than ever, and because I live in a condo, I have limited space, and I can't do vending shows, so I can't really offload some of the old back issues like I used to. I'm running out of space for books, so I've just been doing digital. And when you do a Kickstarter digital, mostly everybody says like, you buy the thing for $3 or $2, $3, $4, or you can spend an extra $2 and get the digital bundle, and it has like 8 books. So
yeah,
I've been doing that, and
there's a lot of like great $5 to $10 digital deals for Kickstarters, where it's like, I know I personally, I had actually a lot more paying comics work in 2020 than I ever expected to, and I put not a ton, but I definitely used part of that to go right back into comics and getting some of these Kickstarters and backing, because I had a lot of people I knew who were putting out some really great stuff, and like I gotta support this because I'm lucky enough to where my art income is not is not needed for my life. It's welcome and it's helpful for funding my endeavors, and like paying for an iPad to continue to work digitally, and or upgrading my microphone or what have you for doing the podcast and stuff like that, or getting a newer monitor or whatever for editing things and stuff. But I'm very fortunate in that way. So I'm like, well, if I can spend $5 here, $5 here, $5 here of that money that I'm making comics to help other people make their comics, then great. And I love the digital. Like I was so like, I like the idea of digital, but like having the tactile paper. But now,
especially
like so many of us, I'm like,
comics, you're like,
I'm like, I don't have the space.
It's going to be, or what paper is going to be. But eventually, you just can be like, oh, this is coming from, Germany. Do you really want to pay the extra,
and to me, I also justify it like, this is the easiest thing for this person. Like, I'm giving you this money. You don't have to ship anything. You don't have to pack anything.
It's a wonderful thing. I
like, here you go. Give me the PDF.
We want those digital backers because
like there's like one or two where I'm like, yeah, you got a sticker. If it's like $2 more for a sticker, I'm like, I'll take the sticker. Like I think Beef Bros, I did. Give me the sticker.
Beef
so
Bros.
Like, from my buddy Tyrell, and so it's it was a weird time. Like, should I release something? And then like so many, and it just happened like from like August to like December. It seemed like every few days someone was launching a Kickstarter and it was doing well and it was hitting its goal and it was doing all these things. And it's like, oh, should I have been preparing for this? Should I have been doing my own for this? Like,
were you in one or two?
Just in a successful one?
Yeah. I was fortunate to be included into a successful horror Kickstarter.
One. Did that one get funded?
Never had a failed one.
I'm sorry, what was that? The audio got kind of washy.
Oh, you had a short, the Blob one?
Yeah,
was that one successful?
Dinner with Blobby. Yeah, that one it hit its goal. It was really great. And I did a lot of work with the writer Phil over the year, and I'm doing something for him right now. I did, I'm actually speaking him to the next episode. He'll be my guest, and
nice.
I kind of became his Swiss Army knife. I did some coloring for him. I did some inking coloring for him just recently too, over another artist, which was really fun because it was a style I was completely different from my own. But it was a lot of fun, kind of doing that kind of things. And
can you divulge that maybe a certain Mr. Westhoff may have?
Well, no, this is separate from that, because now it leads into I had the pleasure of working with you guys and coloring some pitch pages for a really cool concept, a really cool idea. I hope you guys can get fully out there, not because I wouldn't mind more work, but even if I'm not involved and you guys find someone else to color it, I really enjoyed doing it, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I gotta say, I did see all the pages. There was only how many pages
7.
were there, John? 7, and it was 7, for those listening, it's a project, and it was just a pitch package called Depowered. Jon came up with a whole cloth, got me on board, and I did character designs. We worked back and forth with them, and there's a convention, not a comic book convention, but there's a convention scene, and it's in my style, which is I don't even know what my style is.
It's very clean, which I enjoyed coloring over because it made flatting a lot easier.
But there's this one panel which I liked when I mean, you draw and you're like, I don't know if you're like me or like 99% of the artists out of there with the I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome because I don't think I'm good enough for that, but where you're like, oh, this is great, this is my best work, and then you look at the next day, you're like, I
every day
did better.
everything I draw is like that.
Or even like a year later or 2 years or 5 years, like, oh, I was so proud of that, and look at the perspective on that. But there's this one panel where I really like I think it has 3 characters. It has I'm blanking on the names here, John. Where the woman is looking concerned over, and I was just kind of proud of the expression, and I was like, forgot about it. Looked at the colors, and I'm like, just fell in love with that panel. You did a great job. I mean, like.
But you can tell Don's been in many convention rooms. He got that.
Yeah,
got the grunge of the color just right.
Artist friend.
It's just three faces in a panel, and it's just like one of those random, like, if you ask an artist, like, you think like, oh yeah, this splash page or this and that, and you're like, I really like the way this guy's looking at this parking ticket. It's just like the strangest thing, or like, do you see how?
No, that's what it is. Everyone's like, oh wow, yeah, and you're like, man, did you see that scene where the guy just like that one hand because he's like holding a pencil and it looks right and it looks good, and it's like, no, I'm talking about this like 4-page fight scene you had. That was awesome. Like, yeah, but did you see that panel? Or
well, I do need to remind you both that you are under non-disclosure agreements for a book that will probably never come out, or take quite a while.
I'll have to.
I'll post that. I'll tweet that panel underneath the post of this because I like it, and I'll post the link to all the music that we talked about.
Yeah.
So no, I just wanted to thank you for that, and also,
I mean, I'm definitely glad to find a way to work with you both again. And I hadn't even realized, since I helped letter Packs of the Low Country, like you said, Don, we've known each other for a long time, and we really hadn't worked together. Still not your primary role. If you're talking about like sports, I think of you in a different role as an artist, and I'm still trying to find a way to get you something going there. But I'm glad we at least found a way to jam together. And yeah, you did really, like Bob said, I think you brought something extra to the project, which was actually going to be black and white. Just because I like Bob's work in black and white, and I thought the story fit. But, when we started bouncing it around and you said you had availability, I'm really glad that we did that. And I hope this year is better, because that's still a project I'd like to pitch to get it picked up by a publisher, because I think it's a little bit longer, which is a little more difficult to do as an independent publisher. But in true fashion, too, I have Bob working on like 5 projects at once. So we worked on that. We worked on some other things.
I spent a lot of time on the character design, so like, because I know nobody's gonna see this, but Depowered is happens in at least 2 different time periods. Was it 30 years apart or 20 years apart? Okay. And so there's the initial character, and then there's the at least one of them is a little older and a little more worse for wear, But anyway, that's not what we're talking about. What's a CPS stuff?
Yeah, I guess we should start before Don's show goes like 7 hours. We got Rambling Man Bobgar Ornelas came out of a show here.
I had a couple of shots, so.
I thought we were going to have to be prying it out.
Bobgar's loosey-goosey now. I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate the kind words you guys said. Again, it's I love Bob's art, and coloring over him. It's a great clean style, and it looks great black and white. And it was a little daunting. So I'm like, I don't want to screw this up. So
come on now.
But it is also a nice open canvas, and you guys had a few notes here and there, and it was just it was just a lot of fun. Like, it was just really fun. Like, it wasn't, as much as I could say I didn't want to mess it up. It was still just fun to do. Like, I wasn't like stressing it. I wasn't like, oh man, there's like all this, and I think a lot of it has to do just because I know you guys, and I'm like, I want this to be the best it can be. So, and I'm trying to keep in the spirit of things, and, it was just a nice, different thing to do.
I definitely would encourage people out there, if you want to practice flatting, contact Bob, because I'm experiencing my first time flatting coloring for comics, and I think I would have quit if it wasn't Bob's art, because it's a lot harder than I thought. I mean, I've done it here and there, and I've done some digital art. I flatted a couple things for World's Strongest Mailman, but I really hadn't done a whole project, and I would have quit if I had somebody like, I don't know.
He doesn't have
when I have to flat my own art, I just want to punch myself in the crotch because I'm like, why didn't I close this line, or why
Right.
didn't I do this? It'd be a lot
Yeah,
easier.
Bob does a pretty good job of that. It's once in a while, but yeah.
Jon just learned about the non-closed lines because some guy had a military style crew cut. So there was just a couple little lines, and he didn't like it because he's using the wrong tools. But
Yeah,
I'm going to send this link to an affordable drawing tablet. It's very affordable because I bought it,
buddy.
and I'm a
You
cheapskate.
bought it. You are a cheapskate. But yeah, as Bob mentioned, I'm so glad. You've mentioned a lot of key moments in our career here, Don. It's been a great this is your life, Jon and Bob show. Bob, he was the first one I met in the comics creation community. Really, he responded to a post on the 11 o'clock comics forums back when there was forums. I kind of just put a post out there. Hey, does anybody want to draw this? And then he said, yeah, I have some time. And I said, these are a few ideas. He picked one, and we've been working together ever since. So
part-time comic. Drew 2 out of the 3, and then you gave one to, it wasn't Don. Who was it? I did the Tunnel to Nowhere. What was it called?
The Tunnel Home.
Oh God, that was a long time ago. That was one of them. Apocalypse Man is what we're talking about, and
right.
Somebody else did one of your horror ones. It wasn't.
Oh, Brian did one early on too. That was like a.
Oh, that was the caveman one. Yeah, I just didn't like that one.
That was Harry, the caveman one. Yeah, and there was quite a few around that time, but Bob was the first one to respond. We've been working together for over a decade. So when I started part-time comics, part of the reason was it wasn't just that I was burnt out. I didn't want to make comics. Kingbone Press, there was other things that were involved in it, and to be honest with you, I feel I took on a lot of I took on a lot of other people's work, and that really that's difficult for me. When I don't reach my goals, it's fine, but when I'm trying to bring other people with me and I can't get them where whatever these arbitrary goals I set. So when I started part-time comics, it wasn't to be selfish or to say I have all control. It was just saying I'm going to try to focus on putting out my own books under the label, and then maybe later bring people in. I feel like we stretched too much, and Bob and I were almost always in agreement on who we were going to. It wasn't a big deal, but I felt like I needed to reset. But I am glad that Bob would be the first project that we are publishing through part-time comics, because he's the first, the last, my everything. So, CPS, Child Possession Services, is the Kickstarter that's happening now. If you're listening to this, as of January 21st, 2021, it'll be running for a month. It stars Connie Dar, which is very much a character that Bob and I have developed from the ground up. He's had a lot of input into it. She's a social worker like myself, and unfortunately, her role, she works for a government agency that helps bedeviled children who are possessed or post-possession, because in this world we've created, as something we've dabbled in before, possession, demons, things like that are a little more commonplace, and they're actually just known to the world. So, Connie goes out, but, there's a lot more to her. So we encourage people to check out the Kickstarter. She is a very flawed character. And again, Bob very easily can contribute to something like that. And he's had a lot of input into her.
Did you just insult me about being a flawed individual?
I think you know about it. It's all that hardcore music you listen to.
No, but no, Jon is I don't know the term I want to use. No, he's right, because who'd we lose?
You're back.
Here. Nobody. We're waiting for you, sir. How many shots was that?
2, 1. Well, Jon said we lost you, so I assumed you lost me. So Jon was right, saying that we took a long time to develop this character, and I think he mentioned his background as a social worker, and I did want to mention that while the story isn't super depressing or super deals with demonic possession and exorcisms and stuff like that. We're not going to get too deep into any Catholicism or the rites and stuff like that. And it's, while there's more going on, it could just be enjoyed. But he joked about me knowing about flawed individuals, and I think there's a couple of psychological things going on that we're working through. Sorry to put you on the spot here, Jon, but we are talking about, you're obviously a father, so is Don. It's an R-rated book, and not just because of the violence or the language in it, but there's trauma happening to children, and while we're not going to dwell on the negative and just be a downer book, there is consequences to this, and that's why our character is flawed. And so, like I said, Jon is a father, so I think bad things happen to children may be one of his fears, or something we want to work out on the pages here. Am I crossing any boundaries here? Do we need to cut this?
No, I think that's fair to say.
It's great you're giving this extra insight into the book.
Sure.
Because
most of my characters start off as, like this started off as a joke to give people behind the scenes. This was supposed to be my version of Constantine, because Bob really likes Constantine, and it was kind of like it was going to be a short and something like more of like a tongue-in-cheek joke.
Yeah,
and then
going to be a throwaway.
And then Bob added so much more depth. He's like, well, we're going to make her, an American of Eastern Indian descent, and because that's going to tie into her powers, and we started talking about why she drinks so much and she smokes, and she's like Bob said,
and because I've known
she's a Catholic in recovery, right?
I know, or I used to know, a person of that
right.
background.
And once you said that, the character, because the character is very much based on two women I used to work with in the field, of a similar background. And once you started saying that, then the character came to life, and it became something that, we wanted to work on and grow. So it starts off with 2 shorts we did when we were with Kingbone Press. And now, again, Bob really spearheaded a much bigger story that we were able to script together. So it's like 3 stories in one, but I feel like they flow pretty well. So it's 44 pages. It's full color. We have an amazing colorist. We did not work with Don on this one. It was a little bit longer of a project, but Winston Gambro has come on board to color the new stories, and he's amazing, and he's adding so much to it. So it's again, I appreciate that the first book under this new publishing line would be with Bob, and it really encapsulates a lot of what I'm doing in comics, and that's growing characters together. I couldn't have done this project with anyone but Bob. He's added so much to it, more than just the art. And that's really cool to me. So whatever people think of the product, to me, I'm always going to look at it as, what I'm proud of, what we're putting out. And I hope that people will check it out.
No, that's awesome. And I like the symbolism of that. You're with not only Bobby, from what I've seen of what you guys have shown and all that, it looks great. And, Bobgar's notes about, how heavy this kind of thing would take, and what it would take its toll on a person. It's very, very much rooted in reality, much like, as firsthand, Jon, dealing with people and social work and things like that. And, the from what I recall, the kind of rule for like law enforcement officers who are involved with like special victims and stuff like that, it's like a 2-year shelf life. And then you got to be moved out of there because, year in, year out of dealing with like these terrible things happening to kids and people like that. It'll scar you deep. And
yeah, it will. And I don't say that I go into it like purposely like trying to force that into it, but I do think it says something about myself as somebody. One of our first reviewers even said that, he said he's a social worker. Does he work with kids? This is kind of, morbid. And it almost says a lot about that, because when you're doing it for so long, you do become a little bit numb to those kind of things, kids in danger. And I should say there's nothing grotesque or torturous. I wouldn't go that far. But there, there's some kids in difficult situations. And I guess when you work with it for so long, you realize, putting that on the page is not going to be as difficult as the actual human beings that you would work with in these situations. So, yeah, well, maybe that's something about me needing to get help.
Jon, I think the second story does show some of that on the page that you said wouldn't be on the page. And I think the only reason I'm able to draw that is because I'm not a father. I mean, there's demon stuff. I mean, it's not a slasher movie. I think it has a little bit more depth to that, but it's not super depressing. Like, it's not gonna hit you over the head with like the movie Hereditary, where it's just this oppressive thing. I think it's a fun comic. I think it's a flawed character. I think Jon knows I like flawed characters. I mean, from Sherlock Holmes, addiction. One of my fears. I mentioned another fear earlier, but I put Jon on blast here about being a father and fearing injury to children. Of course, I mentioned I drink a lot, and that is one of my fears. And I think up until 6 years ago, I was severely self-destructive, and I think my input into Connie as a character is relating to that, like why such a I don't even know how to say it, because but there is some self-destructive tendencies to her, and like I said, it's not overwrought, but you'll see her taking a shot or two, or cursing out somebody she shouldn't. And I think it's not, hey, we're gonna draw this cool chick exercising demons. You could see it as that, but I think we're coming at it, both of us separately, making a combined effort to create something unique and personal, even if it's on two different levels for each of us. And I think Jon also knows about people with addictions, obviously, in his line of work, and I think it's psychology. I think it's and mental health. I think it's important to everybody that's on this podcast and probably listening to. A lot of artists deal with it and struggle with it, and I'm one of them. And I think that's part of why I think Connie as a character is very interesting. And even though Jon will disagree, my secondary favorite character is one Leo Hoffman, and I think we're gonna butt heads on where he's gonna go, because I think he is. There's a lot to him that we're not going to see, but he's pretty much the foil in the first few stories.
Right, and that's what's so cool about even though it was a bummer, take a couple years off and feel like you kind of lost momentum and you're starting over. A story like this kind of needed to simmer, and then we actually wrote the script with Bob's outlines 2.5 years ago, and then told him shelve it. I'm not going to have time to do it, whatever, once I finish this other project. It's so, but I still feel like now we're talking about and developing the character more. So I still think sometimes you have to do that. Let the character come to you rather than force it. Because I know we're turning everyone off to the book because they're like, why you call it a fun book, but now you're talking about child endangerment and addiction. No one's going to want to read this book, but it really is fun. We don't, as hard as those things are to talk about it, you have to laugh or you'll cry. They always say in my field. We do make it entertaining. There is, there's some intrigue into why are these possessions happening and how is it going to affect. And like Bob said, the fun part is not the surface level or the high level story. it's the characters. Now we have true characters, we're developing, and then he and I can argue about, and where should it go, and why would they do this? And I think that's going to be fun, and I hope that it can be successful so that Bob and I can tell more stories. This is a one-shot story. We try to wrap it up, being realistic about our time. We're not going to do probably, 5, 10 issue series. We're going to do one shots and then, see what's what, and then go from there.
Yeah, there's always more stories, but if this happens to be the only one that gets funded, then we'll be happy with it.
Yeah,
hopefully there'll be more, and hopefully, their characters, obviously they're characters that we want to revisit and continue to develop. I mean, secretly, I torture all my characters. Secretly, I think we have like another 3 stories, or if not more, but definitely more panned out.
For sure.
And every character is going to have their arc, but
well, that's the thing about when you're creating and you get these characters and you start having this time with them, and as they've developed and if they've grown, and as you guys have said, you both have put a lot of your experiences and feelings into these characters. So naturally, the world you created around them and the experiences that you've kind of passed on to them from yourself, it's going to become kind of like an endless font of like, well, we could do this, and that's really cool. I'm really glad that you guys were able to come together again to not only launch Part-Time Comics, but also to do it with a story that you're both having a pretty good personal stake in terms of emotional investment and all that. And I don't think you're turning anybody off by talking about the serious things because a lot of media can be you're talking about the characters and the things they go through. And if you look at a show like the show everyone loves, including myself, Ted Lasso. I don't know if you guys have seen this show.
No,
I've heard it.
Where's
but it's on Apple TV.
Oh, Apple.
But it's a fantastic show, and it's it can be seen as lighthearted and fun and all that. But there's some characters going through some real stuff in those things, so you can have that, and you can still tell an entertaining and quote unquote fun story to like. Even if your characters are deeply flawed or going through some trauma and things like that, you can still do that because it's the story is not entirely wrapped up in the character in of themselves. The characters help make this help guide the story because it becomes more. There's more of a buy-in too, especially with you guys putting in your own stuff into it. And as a reader, I always appreciate when that's the case. You guys talked a lot about the story and the creation of it, which is awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the campaign for the Kickstarter? Because as of posting this episode, it will have been up for just over a week. So are there any cool rewards you guys got going on? You keeping it streamlined, or what's going on with the campaign? What can we look forward to, or what can we look at right now?
You said the keyword. We are keeping it a little streamlined. This is one of the few books. Bob and I have done many successful crowdfundings together. I think we've got 7 under our belt in some form. And we pride ourselves on fulfilling or over fulfilling or going above and beyond. We usually have the book wrapped up or almost wrapped up. This is one of the few times where I kind of rushed Bob because I wanted to put it out there, start 2021 off, with the new company on see where we were at and see if people were interested in this. And then see where we want to go with it, early in the year. So I did kind of push this one, but, Bob has a significant amount of the art done. Winston's done a significant amount of the coloring already. So I'm not having any apprehension about it, but I did want to mention that we've kept it a little streamlined. Bob's doing a few sketches, so you want to jump on those. It's a good opportunity to get those from him at a good price. We've got stickers, we've got magnets, some things, but trying to keep it to stuff that's not going to overburden the art team. So we also should mention we have a great variant cover from the amazing painter Robert Hafferman.
Oh yes,
so that is a reward. That's pretty much we're limiting.
It looks great.
It's so good. I commissioned
Yeah,
that for Bob as a gift, and I was like, Robert, please, can I use this as a
Robert's a friend of ours, but he's an amazing artist, and I really, like that he's typically more traditional with his subject matter and all that, but whenever he lets his geekdom fly out a little bit and he branches in, even if it was like the wrestling paintings he did or things like that, it's always fun to see.
The unofficial handbook of the wrestling, what was it called, John?
That sounds right.
Something like,
it was like it was a really great Robert's a fantastic painter.
Another great one.
It was really great to see him, doing some stuff with you guys as well.
We've got a great pinup edition, which was in the original short Bob published under his series Mendicant. From Brian Bowles did a pinup, another great friend and longtime collaborator. Yes. So we've got some other people involved. But again, Bob's, got his head to the grindstone, nose to the grindstone, doing the art. So, there is, I'm offering, my lettering services at a great discount. So if you see some lettering on there, we're also offering some advertising in the book. We have some extra space. So we do have some things that you do want to jump on because, basically it's the book. We got
retailer packs for any retailers that are listening.
Yep. We have some, deals on multiple books for retailers. So yeah, we're keeping it streamlined, but I think our goal is reasonable. So I think that's okay. If we get a lot of people to support the book, maybe get some stickers, maybe get the digital. We have some bundles too. Part of working together for a long time, you have, a library of books, and I'm fortunate enough to have, several packages, whether it's, featuring Bob, whether it's featuring Brian, whether it's featuring books that I've written on. We have a couple tiers of book packages. So if what we're talking about, is interesting to people, we do have some of our older stuff, including one of our most successful books Bob and I worked on together, which actually made me upset to realize Bob and I have not printed a book together in 6 years or something like that.
What?
7 years.
That sounds crazy.
Bulletproof Chicken was the last. I've done so much with Brian over the years.
Not true. Mm-hmm. That's not true. You were in Mendicant 4, which is
right. I mean, right. We were in BANDTHOLOGY. We did a ton of stuff, but you and I have really focused on shorts. We haven't had a longer project, which is just
longer, like a full.
Here's a floppy. We tried to do the Apocalypse Med trade, did not go through, so that would have been a great one. We could still visit that in the future, but yeah, I realized because of that, we did have one hiccup where we had a crowdfunding that did not go through. Yeah, you and I haven't since Bulletproof Chicken 2. Which we didn't crowdfund, but we haven't printed a book together. So I'm excited to have some Bob art in print in a nice floppy 44 pages. So it's, almost half a trade. Jump on it, please.
Yeah, it's a big book.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great deal, guys. And before, we log off, we do have real quick, some real fun questions from Twitter. The first one is from the aforementioned Dave Jordan, our friend and former guest. Who would win in a fight, Jon's kids or Bobgar's bunnies?
I think the internet would win from cuteness.
I think Bobgar's bunnies would win because Jon's kids would just pet and love the ever-loving crap out of those bunnies.
My kids are lovers. So, his kids are vicious killers. We all know that.
It would be
Ayla will be 10 this year, which is pretty old for a rabbit. The wild, if they're not fixed, we're talking 4 or 5 years. So she's definitely elderly. She's sassy. She won't harm the children. Dwayne Barry is a notorious foot biter.
Dwayne Barry, he's the murderer.
But Lilith, beautiful, beautiful God's creature. Angry, scratches, bites, kicks, if you are not careful. So they got, I don't know, maybe combined 120 pounds on the rabbits, but Lilith.
My son he's not a big guy, but he is a gentle giant. And again, I don't think he could ever bring himself to harm anyone. Yeah, they outnumber him.
From it sounds like it, I don't think I'd win a fight against Lilith. So.
You don't bring out the cilantro fast enough?
Oh, no. Forget about it, huh? You end up 6 feet deep. She grew up on listening to Biohazard. She ain't messing around.
I don't like Biohazard.
I know.
And our second question is from also our good friend Andrew Sanford at LARabbit1 on Twitter. You kind of answered part of his question, which was when the Kickstarter was starting.
Hopefully you've already backed it, sir, as you're listening to this.
But we've talked a bit about the formation of part-time and now that, what does the future hold? Or is this kind of taking, what CPS does and then kind of seeing what happens after that?
Well, again, 2020, I really wanted to focus on pitching and getting something picked up. That was a next goal in what I've done in here in comics. Didn't work out that well because, it was a rough year. So I am still trying to get pitches picked up. I have, multiple projects in the work because I can't set boundaries with myself. But yeah, I'd love to see more CPS. Bob and I already talked about a story this week when I was kind of feeling anxious about the Kickstarter and writing him emails at 3 a.m. So hopefully if this does well, more CPS would be great. I do have a project in the very beginning stages with aforementioned Mr. Harry Moyer, who I love to work with. We've been trying to find a way to work together, trying to do a zine focused around the game Magic the Gathering. So hopefully that will come out this year. So those are the only two projects that are really like CPS and the zine with Harry would be the two that are more solid. But I'm hoping for more, depending on how this does.
Awesome.
Oh, and if you want to see Harry Moyer, check out at Bite Size Dracula on Instagram.
Those are great.
He did a 4-panel adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the actual novel, not the movie, and broke it up because it's all in the novel. If you read it, even if you didn't, it's all broken up into certain dates. So he did it real time.
So good. Like literally posted the days. Yeah, so
2020. So if it was May 6th in the book, you would see May 6th on Instagram, and just go there, read it. I think it's 212 pages or some.
And it's free. He's giving it away for free. It's so good.
It's crazy, but
yeah.
Definitely. And I'll make sure I toss a link into the show notes too, because Harry's great, that was a really awesome project he did. So guys, it's been a blast talking to you. It's been a blast hearing you guys just rib each other. I feel like I'm back at at one of the few convention outings I've done.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. I hadn't realized how much I missed it, so I appreciate the conversation with both of you. I don't get to talk to you enough.
It's been a blast. Hopefully, our time to meet again in person is sooner rather than later. And Bob and I can share an authentic squirt soda again, as has become my tradition of bringing them whenever Bob's in town to the C2E2. So guys,
I meant to get one for this recording, but I forgot.
I it crossed my mind, but I'm like, I don't know if I know Bob's in California. It's a massive lockdown. I don't know if he's going to get out to do it, if it's going to even be available. So next time, even if we don't get to see each other in person, next time you guys come on, we'll have to have our virtual squirt. That sounds terrible.
That's a good way to end it. Keep your virtual squirt to yourself.
I can't end it like this though, guys. You got to tell everybody where can we find you online, and don't forget the bunny Instagram either, Bob, because everyone needs to subscribe to that too. So
so where can you find me? Twitter at Slurmo, SLURMO, on Instagram at Bobgar, BOBGAR _Ornelas, ORNELAS, and my wife's Angie's Instagram is Auburn Mouse, which is 100% pictures of the rabbits.
That's an important one. And you can find me now at Part-Time Comics. Search Part-Time Comics with an X. It'll come up on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm anti_drummer on Twitter, where you'll see me harassing the likes of Don and Bob regularly.
And all of the Magic the Gathering celebrities.
Always.
And I'll make sure to have that all linked in the show notes, including a link to your Kickstarter. I hope by the time we're, this post and we're talking about it, it's already been funded. So this is just, a victory lap for you guys. But, fingers crossed on that. I can't recommend comics by these guys enough. You guys put a lot of love and passion into what you do, and, you got the skill to back it up. So I always love reading what you do, and I always love, working with you guys, and obviously I love talking to you guys. So thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Don.
Anytime.
Thank you for listening to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, please consider subscribing via your favorite podcast player, sharing links to the episodes via social media when they post, or consider going to ko-fi.com/comicscoffeemetal. That's coffee.com/comicscoffeemetal. All funds raised for the show go towards equipment upgrades and promotion. Thanks for listening.